Hey guys, welcome to day 4, video number 2. So you just watched a video of retention, turn, resolution, change, and conclusions. Now we're going to jump into more style details. So what this means is you have your theme, you have some sort of structure or arrangement to your paper. That's the stories that you're going to tell. You know a little bit about showing versus telling, and you are a little comfortable with the introduction and conclusion. Okay, so hopefully all of those things are true or nearly true, so we can focus on more specific elements like the style or the voice of your paper. So a couple of notes before we get there. Some of you were confused about the difference between free writes or journal entries and writing responses. So real quick, this information is on the syllabus and it's in the other videos, but the journal is right here. These are the free writes, okay? They're the exact same thing. You have 25 journals throughout the whole semester. The reason why you have 25 journals is you'll do one every day except for when a major project is due. What counts as a major project? The 3 main papers and then 2 portfolios. So the narrative paper, rhetorical analysis paper, stakeholder paper, and the midterm and final portfolios. You will not have a free write on the days that those things are due. The narrative paper, again, is due 11:59 p.m. Friday, tomorrow. Okay? So these always follow a prompt, 3 to 5 minutes. They should take you very, very short amount of time. Just wake up, do them. I count them every day. Respond to them every day, and it helps me identify what you're struggling with and what you're getting. The writing responses, on the other hand, are located under papers and coursework, exploratory writing, under coursework, and writing response 1, 2, 3, I'll put up the others as they become relevant. So these are for a grade, and they count as 20% of your overall grade. There are 10 of them throughout the whole semester, and you can see on the syllabus when they are due. I'll also send you ample reminders and help you along the way with what to include in each writing response. Okay, so I hope that clears up any confusion with the free writes and the writing responses. So let's go ahead and jump into these documents that I had you read for today. They are again under coursework, papers, narrative, where all of your readings will be for this unit, and the style document. Alright, so we're going to start from biggest to smallest, and the most important would be point of view. Alright, so point of view. This one is a pretty simple concept you've probably heard of before. Point of view is first person, second person, or third person. Second person is the least common, but a lot of creative writers are getting into point of view, punto diez, specifically Lori Moore also. First person is the most common form for the narrative paper. It's because it's a personal paper. It's a narrative. Okay, that's the genre. So you can write in third person. However, I think it's a little bit strange to refer to yourself in third person. If I were writing a paper, I wouldn't say Natalie applied for an English job and is an ESL instructor. Okay, it just seems a little too distant for the audience. So go ahead and stick to first person unless you really, really have a good reason for switching to third. The main thing is just consistency. No matter what you do, just be consistent with it and be able to defend your stylistic choices whenever, if I comment on it in my feedback. Okay, so the second thing is the difference between objectively describing the situation and subjectively describing the situation. So the objective method is less judgmental. There aren't really a lot of opinions about it. Whereas the subjective description, words like decaying, grim, and foreboding, those have a clear negative connotation. Whereas old, dark, tall, they just exist. Okay, they're not necessarily good or bad, negative or positive. So for your papers, it would be better to stick to the subjective descriptions. So first person and subjective, because we're trying as readers to get as close to your mental state as possible. All right. So this also comes into play with your tone. If you are talking about decaying, grim, foreboding, a mansion that's decaying, grim, and foreboding, then you probably don't have a great relationship with that mansion unless you're into like Halloweenish, grim type things, which I think would be cool because I'm really into zombies. So that's point of view. It's pretty self-explanatory. I'm sure you all have some form of experience with it. All right, let's move on to focus. Focus. This is one of the most important parts of the narrative paper. Focus is exactly what it's asking in the middle. Why am I telling this story? Why should someone else be interested in reading about my experience? It's essentially the infamous so what question. So this is why is the story unique to you? Why are you telling it? A lot of you are writing sports papers, and the sports paper has an extra burden of arguing how your experience of a specific sport or your triumph or your failure, how is it different from everyone else's? Okay. Also, that's the main reason why I said don't write about identity or change, because if you write about identity or change, you have no focus. You can't really argue that your identity or your experience of change is different because you're arguing that it exists, and everyone goes through identity exploration or change. Okay, so making it more specific by answering free write number 2, I really tried to guide you guys if I felt you were leaning toward identity or change, and I tried to challenge you to be more specific there. All right, so make sure you're very clear in mostly your conclusion, somewhat your introduction, why this story matters. Why are you telling it? All right, the next thing that I had you read for today is style. Style, there are a lot of subheadings, so let's just jump into it. Fragments. You can use fragments in this paper. The narrative paper is the most flexible genre of writing, other than something like fiction, flash fiction, other things that we're not going to tap into in this class. So we'll look at a sample paper that has a great use of fragments. As long as you can defend your use of fragments, then I'm on board. Okay? Don't just do it because you don't know the grammar rules for fragments. I highly encourage you guys to use dialogue in these papers. We'll look at a sample one. There's actually a sample one already up that has dialogue in it. It's a great way to show a scene as well. So instead of saying we had a conversation or we watched The Walking Dead, describe to your reader what specifically was the conversation about, or how did you watch The Walking Dead? Where were you? Did you make zombie cupcakes? Like, that would be cool. Great detail, but put that moment of conversation in your papers. Dialect. This relates to dialogue. If you come from a specific part of West Virginia, or some of you are from Connecticut or Florida, I'm sure there are things that you say, or you have phrases, or the way that you phrase things that is specific to your region. So dialect is could be a great tool to include in your papers. Things like gonna, G-O-N-N-A, or I mentioned in a video earlier, one student said so, and he spelled it with a lot of O's to emphasize the exaggerated nature. Okay, so this here, it says don't simply list ideas or list details. I agree that you should not create a chronology or a resume of your entire life, but you can have a sort of list that describes your surroundings. So, for example, if you are a wrestler, or you play a sport, or you are in a band or something like that, you probably are going to be surrounded by things that pertain to your sport or your music or whatever, your political beliefs, who knows. So describe those things. You might even list them in just a introduction paragraph, some body paragraphs. Look around your room right now or wherever you are, and what things do you own? How do they describe you? Okay? All right, and the last thing for style is you might frame your stories with a central image. So, for example, we've already talked about the astronaut who is falling back or re-entering Earth in Earth's atmosphere, and the student describes how the astronaut experiences pressure, and he relates that to the pressure he feels in college. He then revisits the image of the astronaut in his conclusion, and he continues the theme of pressure throughout the entire paper. Another student has a buffalo in her paper, and in the introduction, because she grew up with a buffalo on her family's farm. Very unique. And then she revisited the buffalo in the conclusion. Okay, so she had this really strong image, and she framed her paper with those two images. All right, I'm going to grab the last document, which would be language. And this one we've already talked about a little bit, but basically use active verbs, so things like hit, run, dragged, rode, etc. Those are active verbs. If they're basically actions you can do, then they're normally active verbs. Okay? Avoid be verbs, and avoid have, has, had. So be verbs include is, are, was, were. Just avoid them because they give us no new information about the character or the situation or the emotion of the scene. It's just better to avoid those. Passive voice and active voice we'll get into a little bit later. If you know the difference between them already, or you can glean the difference from this small description, great. But if not, we will table this for another day. Concrete nouns, the second part of the language description, basically just means specific details. So tangible items. Instead of saying car or motorcycle or something generic like beverage, what specifically? Blue 1989 Honda Civic would be a much better description than just car. What type of beverage, quote unquote, okay? Think about brand names. You can put those in your paper. Think about television titles, basically as much flavor and spice as you can manage. Metaphors and similes. So metaphors and similes I encourage you to use as long as they are not cliches. Cliches will make me angry a little bit, but I'll just mark them out. I'll just be annoying about it. I'll highlight them and I'll say another cliche, okay? So it helps you be aware of how you're using language in your more academic papers. So let's take a quick look. We're almost out of time, but let's take a quick look at this student's paper. His introduction paragraph here really has a lot of style to it. He actually modeled it on a paragraph out of Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451, which we had read a section of that in his English 101 class. So he has things like mountain, period. So that's a fragment, but then he repeats it, mountain, period, stream, river, curve after curve after curve. So repetition here, a state border. This is starting to resemble then, all of this resembles passing, like driving along highway. The things that you can kind of see, or hiking, or motion, traveling, okay? So he resembled what was actually going on the outside with his own writing. I'll go ahead and put this part up online just because we're out of time, but otherwise just let me know if you guys have questions and I will post another video tomorrow.